Sorry, we're late on the news report, but this just in, we're talking about the wisdom of Solomon and the wisdom in the Old Testament. And in other news, Girl Scout cookies are selling out, so you should go buy some.
Well, I don't know if they had any Thin Mints in the Old Testament, Betty.
No.
But what I do know is they had a lot of wisdom. And if they had a lot of wisdom, they probably would have liked your Thin Mints, right? Okay. Now, I know by now that if you heard somebody say, hey, man, you're a wise guy. Is that a good thing? No. Well, you know something? I'm going to tell you that Solomon was not a wise guy, but a wise man. So I want to talk with you about two very important kings we've already talked about before. And I think you know that one is King David and the other one is his son. Now, you may remember that David did a lot of singing and played his harp when he sang. And we even talked about the fact that we still have some of his songs. But you may remember that I told that he also had 150 of the best songs ever written. And they're called the Psalms. And in them we find out more about what the shepherd boy who became the king of Israel was thinking and praying about. Sometimes he was happy, sometimes he was sad, sometimes he was out with his sheep, at other times he was running off to Jerusalem. Now, do you sing the same songs when you're upset as you do when you're super happy, Betty? No, and most people have songs that match their emotions and their moods. And sometimes we even say things we wish we hadn't said, but we did anyway. People say lots of things to God. People even get angry with God. And just like we found out with Job and his friends, they had a lot to say to God and about God. But when they finally listened to God, well, he straightened them out. Well, just for a moment, I want you to think about the Psalms as being King David's feelings and thinking, sometimes all jumbled up together just like we do. Actually, God would rather that we say what we are feeling and thinking. Because after all, he already knows. Because you can't keep anything from God. Well, when David was a shepherd long before he was king, he had lots of experience with sheep. And so that means that he also knew about the enemies of sheep and also about who he could count on to help him with the sheep. Betty, have you ever heard of sheepdogs?
No.
Well, sheepdogs are beautiful dogs, and they can help out the sheep. Well, even though people who have such a dog may not have sheep, this breed of dog has always helped the shepherds herd the sheep. Even when a shepherd wore and what he carried with him during the time of David tells us a great deal. So let's think about some of the things that the shepherd would have. He carried a rod to protect his sheep from the wolf. He carried a staff to pull the sheep out of the bushes. He had oil to anoint the ears of the sheep to keep the bugs away. He had some dried fish and some cheese so that he didn't have to wait in line at McDonald's. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there was a McDonald's.
Oh, there wasn't a McDonald's.
It was made in 1970 something.
Oh, well, maybe.
I think. I don't know.
Well, maybe it was called McDavid's. So, yeah. So he had to be near good green grass for his sheep to have food. And he had to be near fresh water for him and his sheep. Can you think of any psalm that you have heard that sounds a little bit like this, where we're talking about sheep, grass, oil, rod, staff? Well, one of the most favorite psalms of most people is Psalm 23. In fact, many people memorize it because it really touches their heart. It can be really very lonely being a shepherd, Betty, when the only ones you can talk to are sheep, because I don't know. Have you ever talked to sheep, Betty?
No, because I've never met one.
If I introduced it to sheep, do you think you could have a good conversation with them where they would sit down and talk back?
Yes, I'd say, "Bah," and
That's
then,
right.
And then they'd say, "Well, Betty."
Well, then, you know what? The
No,
next...
I'd say, "Bee."
Would you do that?
And they say, "Bah."
Yeah, that would be a good question, but I think I'd take Dr. Doolittle with me to help out. So anyway, here's what it says, and I want you to be able to listen to this. It's a favorite psalm of many people. It's called Psalm 23, and it says something like this. The Lord is my shepherd, so I don't have to worry about not having what I need. He lets me lie in soft green grass, and he leads me to fresh water. He makes me feel much better when I need it, and he directs me so that I don't get off track. Even when I walk into dangerous places and I see scary shadows, I don't have to be afraid because the Lord's right there with me. The Lord's rod and his staff protect me, and he even has a great place for me to sit down and enjoy myself, even when there are troublemakers all around me. He lovingly wipes my face with smooth and calming oil, and I have more than enough in my cup to drink. The Lord is so good to me, and he forgives me when I ask for forgiveness. And that love goes with me wherever I go. And I know that I will be with him in his house forever. Betty, isn't it wonderful to know how much we're loved?
Yes.
There are many more wonderful songs and poems like this, by the way, Betty. And I hope that you'll pick a few of these psalms later on in life. Not just as a child, but as an adult. Now, do you remember King Solomon, Betty?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember what his daddy's name was?
King David.
That's right. So King Solomon is King David's son. And do you remember that God granted King Solomon one wish?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was? Wisdom! Yay! So, the next book of the Bible is the book of Proverbs.
No.
And we can honestly say that it's all about the wise sayings of Solomon. You may remember that when we talked about King Solomon a few chapters ago, that the Bible told us that some of his wise sayings were written down. Yep. Well, here they are all written down. And, wow, they are so special. So, let's see. Do you know what a proverb is?
No, I haven't.
Well, a proverb is a wise story that has something even wiser right in the very middle of it. So, let's look at this for example. Let's pretend that I wanted to teach you something. Then I decided to teach it to you by telling you a little story. Then maybe you could remember the story after I told it, and when you thought about the story, it reminded you of the truth. The truth I wanted you to hear and remember. For example, he talks about families. In one place, he says that a really wise son makes his daddy super, super happy, but that a foolish son really upsets his mommy. How about that? In another place, he tells us that a kind answer to someone turns back unkindness, but that nasty words just make people more angry. There are so many wise words. How about this one? If you have done and said everything you can to pretend that you are better than everyone else, it would be better just for you to keep your mouth shut. Here's a final one for you from Proverbs. If you get cream and you churn it, then you get butter. Yeah, if you churn cream, you get butter. If you twist your nose, you get a nosebleed. Yeah, and if you stir up anger, you get more bitter anger. I hope that someday you'll want to read the book of Proverbs. In fact, some of the wise sayings will even make you laugh. Well, that's for sure. Have you ever heard someone called a preacher? Well, when a bishop, priest, or a deacon steps into the pulpit to deliver a sermon, we can say that he is the preacher. Now, in some churches, especially where you and I live, the people call their priest or minister a preacher all the time. He's the preacher, but I don't think he preaches all the time. Well, sir, the next book just after Proverbs is the book of the preacher, or it is usually called Ecclesiastes. Now, when we read these books that we've been talking about, we usually call them wisdom literature. And you remember, that's the gift that was given to Solomon. That means that instead of reading about history or hearing about a particular king or prophet, we receive amazing wisdom from God through Solomon in particular. In some ways, we can say that Ecclesiastes tells us that life isn't always fair, and that no matter what, eventually everybody has a funeral. Did you know that?
Yes,
that is the truth.
has to.
Yeah. Even the opening seems to be a bit odd, as Solomon says, everything is meaningless. But remember that what King Solomon says is filled with wisdom. In fact, one of his beautiful songs was made into a modern song.
Really?
Uh-huh. Here are the beautiful words. There's a time for everything. There's even a season for everything that happens. There's a time to be born, also a time to die. There's a time to plant something, and there's a time to pull it up by the roots. Sadly, there's a time to kill, and there's a time to heal. There's a time to tear down, and also a time to build. There's a time to cry, and there's a time to laugh. Ha, ha, ha.
Ha ha ha.
And there's a time to be super and
what?
I don't know, super sad.
Super sad?
And then there's a time to get up and dance.
Dance.
There's a time to scatter stones, and there's a time to gather them. There's a time to give a big hug and time not to give any hugs. There's time to search for something and also a time to give up searching. There's a time to keep and a time to throw away. There's a time to tear and there's a time to mend. There's a time to keep your mouth shut, and there's a time to speak. There's a time to love and a time to dislike something really bad. And there's a time for war, and a time for peace. So, King Solomon tells us once again, there's a time for everything that takes place in our life, Betty. It's an amazing book. I hope you read it someday. Finally, today, we're going to come to a love song. And I don't even have the radio on playing your favorite station about love songs. In fact, this book is called The Song of Songs. Do you remember the Passover? Remember we talked about it when the Jewish people had to leave Egypt?
All right, I forgot about that, and then I asked my mom, because that was only I think it was last night, because one of the characters in one of my shows is Jewish, and he said I haven't eaten something since Passover.
See that? So you've gotten to meet people who celebrate Passover. Well, let me tell you, at that meal, you can imagine they're so happy they start singing. And so, some of the songs that they sing come from this book called Song of Songs. Well, on the 8th day of Passover, the Jews would sing parts of this beautiful book. It has so many beautiful verses, and there's no other book in the Bible like this one. Now, sometimes people disagree as to what exactly this book means. Is it talking about romance? Like when somebody in school says to you, Billy likes you. Or when someone wants to talk to you about marriage. Or is it really about the relationship between Israel and God? Well, all I know is that this book is beautiful. That's right. La, 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 la. Here's one of the really beautiful verses, and sometimes it's read at weddings. Listen to this one, Betty. This is sometimes at weddings. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal in your arm, for love is really as strong even as death. Love is just like a beautiful flame, and many waters cannot put out that fire, and many rivers cannot wash away that love. If anyone would give away all the money they had, love would still be more valuable. So, what do you think about love? Can you name a few people whom you love, Betty?
You, Nana,
You know what? I just saw your godmother's name come up there. Did you see that?
yeah.
I think you love Aunt Virginia, don't you? Yeah, I know you do.
My mom, my dad. I kind of have to love my sister.
Yeah, you
No,
gotta.
not really.
I know.
Even though I have to.
We learn. I understand. Now, can you think of a few people who love you?
Everybody that I said. And my aunts, my uncles,
Yeah, your aunts, your
my
uncle,
cousin.
cousins, grandparents.
Everyone.
So, do you think God loves you?
Yes.
I know. Do you think that he only loves you when you're really, really good, or do you think he can also love you when you're not good all the time?
Yes.
He can love you all the time, right?
Yes.
He loves you because you're Betty, because he made you, because you're special.
Yay.
And Carol says she loves you, and so's your godmother says she loves you. So, do you know that there is nothing that you could ever do, Betty, that would make God not love you? No matter what. I'm telling you the truth. I always tell you the truth. I hate when people say, let me tell you the truth. And then I like to say to them, yeah, well, what were you telling me the rest of the time? But I will tell you this, dear. Never forget this. God will always love you no matter what. God is perfect, and his love for us is perfect. We can't buy his love with money, but we can ask him to show us his love. And every time you look at a picture of Jesus, or you look at a cross, that reminds you, dear, how much God loves you. And you know, Betty, as you understand, your Nana and I have taught you that you have to have a cross in every room of your house, right? And the reason we do that, or a picture of Jesus.
I have a cross in my room. Natalia has a cross in her room. We don't have a cross in our bathroom.
It's okay.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we have crosses in every room except for the bath.
Well, maybe you can put a picture of the River Jordan in your bathroom, or maybe the Red Sea. Okay, you can think about it.
I think we might have a cross in the little room because that's still the bathroom.
Well, wherever we go, sweetheart, we need to keep our eyes firmly fixed on Jesus. And isn't it wonderful to have books like the ones I told you about today, so that we can always understand how much God loves us? And I think I'd like to say that to some of those people out there right now, because you can see some names coming up. Betty, would you like to tell people out there about God's love? Would you like to remind everybody out there that God loves them?
God loves you.
Yeah. And Betty, don't we love the people out there who check in with us?
Yes.
We do. And we thank you for checking in with us, especially at the end of Cookie Tide. And Betty?
Yes.
You know something?
What?
I sure love you.
I knew that.
Have a blessed day, everybody.
Bye-bye.